He continues, but the problem is that the world attracts you with its instant pleasures. When your senses contact the external objects, you enjoy them forthwith. You do not realize that the pleasures arising out of sense contacts are fleeting. They diminish and gradually yield to sorrow. Conversely, you find that true happiness has a distasteful beginning. When you try to seek happiness within yourself, it is bitter to start with. But with determined effort, you gain more and more happiness. It is strange but true. Sorrow appears in the mask of joy, and joy appears in the mask of sorrow. It is the law of nature. Consequently, ignorant masses discard happiness and court sorrow. This has been the sad history of humans. The Bhagavad Gita cautions you of this paradox in nature. Its 18th chapter states, true happiness is like poison in the beginning but nectar in the end, verse 37. False happiness is like nectar in the beginning but poison in the end, verse 38. Okay, so he's talking about this strange paradox, as he points out. If what we liked, if the things that we wanted to pursue and contact and enjoy were at the same time conducive for our genuine well-being, there'd be no philosophy, there'd be no self-help books, we wouldn't be here. All you need to do is follow exactly what you like. If you like something, go for it. Unfortunately, it's the case, or fortunately, it's the case that the things that we like have no necessary connection to our sustained, genuine well-being. The things that we don't like are not necessarily related to our long-term unhappiness. Unfortunately, we have this idea. He talks about instant pleasures. We don't sort of look further than, a few minutes ahead. And so if it can deliver me pleasure now, I go for it. Not knowing that at some point down the track, I'm going to suffer as a result. So he uses some very simple examples elsewhere in the text. He talks about, for example, physical exercise, or just at the physical level in general. To get yourself initially into a physically exertive practice, there's a sense of resistance that you have to overcome. Now, if you want to go for a jog, the hardest part of going for a jog is putting your shoes on. That's it. From the couch to your closet to put your shoes on. That's the hardest part of a jog. Once you've got your shoes on, the rest of it just happens. But there's an initial resistance because it's so pleasant to just not. Or, what we often do is, or at the academy they do this, and we still do this, get up early in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, get up, take to the books, start studying. Now in the initial stages, it's dreadful, it's terrible. Because at 4:30 in the morning, you only want to do one thing. Exactly what you were doing at 4:29. You don't want to drag yourself out of bed and sit in front of the text. But with understanding, you recognize that certain practices, even though they are distasteful in the beginning, if you sustain them, if you keep them going, they bring a long-term, sustained sense of well-being. So exercise and eating healthy is a good example. It might be painful in the beginning, but you get to a point where that becomes joyful. Same thing with studying in the morning. Once you get used to getting up at 4:30, getting up at 6, you feel like you've missed the best part of the day. What a waste. And you feel so much better for having done it. You know it. You get used to it. And the exact same thing happens in the other direction. The joy that we get from gratifying immediate desire, immediate satisfaction, it leads down the track to dissatisfaction. And we can use the same examples. Junk food, satisfy that immediate demand. What happens to the physical body? Deteriorates. So what's initially pleasant turns out to be painful. And what's initially painful turns out to be pleasant. So the question is, what is it that would spur us to say no thank you to the thing that is pleasant now and yes to the thing that is unpleasant now? Why would we? Yeah, so it's understanding. That's pretty much all it is. If someone tries to put an external compulsion, do this, don't do that, it's not going to work. You know, or if you put it on yourself, if you force yourself to do something because somebody else does it, or because someone else told you to do it, it won't sustain itself. You're just going to become frustrated. What makes that process much easier is our own understanding of what we should be doing and why we should be doing it. And so that's why reflecting upon these ideas is the primary practice. Because nothing else that we try to put into place thereafter is going to work if we are not convinced that it's the right thing to do. So this comes down to what we're talking about a number of times is any time that we try to practice self-control without being thoroughly convinced internally that it's the right thing to do, we frustrate ourselves. Right? And it lasts for a while. You know, the example is the binge dieter. From today, I'm going to stick to my diet. And you force yourself not to eat whatever it is that you would normally eat. And it lasts for a couple of weeks, and then bang, it breaks, and you binge. And you eat it all, that 2 weeks worth of whatever it is you didn't eat, it gets done in one meal. And then there's all that negative emotion, self-loathing and regret and remorse. But when there is a valid reason not to do it, then it's a much smoother transition. So a good example of this, it's also a bad example, but it illustrates the point. I knew someone who was wanting to lose some weight, say, I don't know, 20 pounds or something. And she'd always struggled to lose weight. But she was asked, will you be my bridesmaid? By a friend of hers. And so she knew she was going to be in a range of photographs right next to the bride in a bridesmaid's dress, etc. And so she said, right, for that wedding, I want to look my best. I want to look good for that. And she was telling me it's so easy to say no. Because she had a goal. She had a very clear understanding of the thing that she wanted. And that made saying no so much easier. Whereas before, when there was that attempt to diet or to restrain her eating habits, it was much more difficult because there was no clear conception it's the right thing to do. Some vague idea she had, some external pressure to look a particular way. And so she tried to do it, but it didn't sustain itself. Now, the problem with this example is what?
There's not enough weddings in the course of the year.
Yeah, she's going to have to constantly be going to weddings.
It's a short-term goal.
So once she has the wedding, then, of course, the reason is gone, and so the practice is gone. And so this is why it's important that if we're going to practice self-control in any way, that it becomes not just a long-term goal that we have, but that we are thoroughly convinced that this is the right thing to be doing.